Welcome to chapter 4 of the Book of Nehemiah. We have the people now building the walls of Jerusalem. I'm sure that these people, when they came back, they brought certain amounts of building equipment, tools, and certain amount of timbers, I believe, were sent back to rebuild the temple. But I don't believe that they could have possibly brought back enough to rebuild the walls. So you have all these people, I believe it's 50,000 it totals in one place in Ezra. All these people that were scattered about, a lot of them were in Jerusalem. And so when Nehemiah got there and he saw everything dilapidated, tore down, and broken up, you can kind of imagine seeing a picture of these huge walls of stone, and part of them all busted down, big holes in it, and then nice, perfect condition for a while, and then another place broken down, especially all of the gates and the gate houses, which were large, huge buildings in themselves within the wall. And here you have all these people that came, the Jews, to rebuild, and the people from the area there didn't want them to take over control, and so they came against them, but yet they continued in their building, and they armed themselves while they were building, and Nehemiah had a ram's horn to blow. We'll get into that into this chapter. But then here we see all these people, thousands of people. They're all digging in the ground with different kinds of tools for digging, like a shovel or a spade and so forth, and pulling out the dirt and the rubble and finding pieces of timber that they can save, or pieces of metal, or pieces of bronze or brass that they could melt down, and piling them in different piles probably, and then having people there that would clean all these pieces up and turn them back into something that would be usable, finding the stones and recutting them if they needed it, smoothed out so they could be reused in the walls and in these gatehouses, and taking the wood that they could find that wasn't burnt to rebuild these gates and so forth. And all the way around the city, this was going on with thousands of people. You can hear the hammering, bang, 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 and people yelling do things, so lift this up a certain way, watch out, be careful, don't let it fall, and using cords and lines to pull things up and level things, and all these things were going on here in Jerusalem. And so while that was going on, it says in verse 1, and it came to pass when son of Alat heard, acoustics comes from that, I could have highlighted 191, when he heard that we were building the wall, that it was evil to him. And he was angry very much and was laughing out over the Jews. And this was a man that was a Samaritan up there in the northern part, in between Galilee and Judah down below. So he's laughing at these people, what they're doing. And he spoke before his brothers, and the force army is dynamios, generally is an army type of a force of the Samaritans, and said, what are these Eudamini, is the Greek transliteration from the Hebrew, Eudamini, Judamen do, sort of a derogatory term. What do these Judamen do? The Jews. Shall we not abandon them? Is it to sacrifice? Is it that they will be able to? And today, will they repair the stones with the embankment rubbish for being burnt? So, what are they going to do with all this stuff? And Tovias, the Ammonites, was next to him, son of Alat. And he said to them, and even if they shall build, shall not a fox ascend and demolish the wall of stones? They're not going to be able to build up anything very good. Anything will knock it over, a light wind, and it'll all fall over. They're not able to do anything right. And then Nehemiah has akuson here, 191 acoustics again from the derivative. O the God of our God, O our God. For we became for sneering, and return their scorning upon their head, and give them for sneering in a land of captivity. Not what Jesus would have us to do, but yet when you have these rules of an arm for an arm, a leg for a leg, and so forth, brutal repercussions for people that'll happen. In the Old Testament, we see this quite a bit. Give them over to a land of sneering. Take them captive. But when Jesus came, it changed that. Our attitude is no longer to be such, but to calm our ways. It's not easy when you're in the middle of politics and people that don't like you, and the world doesn't like to be held down. It wants to be out of control, basically. Just yelling and screaming. Anarchy is really popular today in the United States with quite a few people. They just want to cause hell, raise Cain, do whatever they can to cause problems. But giving them over to sneering. So, and then he continues, and you should not cover over their lawlessness. And it's reminding that these people are not true believers in Jehovah, Yahweh. Not that they were either, but of course, they'll bring this up, the other person's lawlessness and their sin. You shouldn't cover over. Look at them. May it not be wiped away from your face. You look and see what they're really like. Well, I look at today and I see a lot of people that are hypocritical, that can find fault and then want to find some kind of a fault with somebody, but yet they don't look at their own condition and seeing the things that they're doing. And I'm not saying this was happening here, but it could very well have been, looking at somebody else's lawlessness and bringing it in front of God. Well, that's a dangerous thing to do, because it mentions that Jesus, I believe it was, it says, judge not unless you be judged. Then you continue it for whatever you do that they do, and you condemn them, you're condemning yourself, more or less. So be careful. And they continue, for they provoked you to anger before the ones building. And that would be, I guess, them. And we built the wall. And all the wall was joined together unto the half of it. Now, I'm not exactly sure what it means by the half of it, halfway around the wall or halfway up, or just half of the work being done. But this says they completed joining them together. So I'm not sure what that half would be, but it continues and it says, and the heart of the people became so as to construct. So it's like we have something that feelings that God puts inside of us that we need to do certain things at certain times. Now, I've done a lot of construction, especially right here on this house, because it's being used in a tourist area. Lots of people come by, want it to look nice, and I don't want it to be like the proverbial painter who does his beautiful paintings, but his truck looks a mess. And you'd look at it and you think, well, what kind of painting is he going to do if it looks like a mess? Well, I have the same with this house. I have brochures out front that mention the Apostolic Bible. And so my heart was to construct. Well, I'm done constructing, and now I'm doing other things that the Lord has it on my heart to do. A heavy thing on my heart is to finish the Bible with these video seminars. So every day, after I go through and check my email and send out the Bibles, get them prepared in the morning, then during that period of time if I take a coffee break, and I'll go through and highlight all these yellow or orange words are in their English derivatives book, and I get ready for the night's video. I'd like to be able to do 6 a week, but I don't think I've ever done that many, so I can get through the rest of the book Bible that I haven't done yet. So that's on my heart, the heart of the people. And God gives people different hearts, but theirs at this time, they had to construct. They felt like they had to construct. And it's interesting how God puts that impulse in us. And it came to pass, as son of Lot heard, and Tobias, and the Aravis, and the Ammonite, and the Azotii, the Arabians, Ammonites, Ashdodites. They were Ashdod, I think, is in the Gaza area. And that the development of the walls of Jerusalem ascended, and they began to block up the gaps, that it appeared exceedingly wicked to them, to the Samaritans. They're starting to be successful in building this wall. It's going to be a strong wall. And the gaps are being closed up. These people aren't going to be able to get in very easily. And they gathered all together to come and to deploy, and generally it has to do with military, against Jerusalem, and to do it for a delusion, and the double is an 8, is for a distraction, is what that word means, to do it for a distraction. Now, it could have very well been just a lot of people deploying like they are today in Gaza, and many Palestinians, and they're throwing rocks and burning tires and doing whatever they can to distract the rulers of Israel. So this was probably happening at that time. People are pretty much do the same thing, it seems like, over and over again. History repeats itself. Well, and we prayed to our Theon, God, theology comes from that, and set an advance guard against them day and night. Emeris and Niktos. Ephemeral comes from that, and nocturnal comes from that Greek word. From before them. So they set an advance guard, people out front to watch, just like they do today. There's a army there down at the fence at Gaza, across from these people throwing rocks, and they're even sending kites or balloons with fire on them to fall in the fields of the Jews and burn them and so forth. And Judah said, well, the strength of the enemies is broken, and the dust is vast, and we shall not be able to build on the wall. So now exactly who Eudas, a person, or if that was the people in Judah, some of them, I'm not sure. And the ones afflicting us said that they shall not know and shall not see until whenever we should come into the midst of them and should murder them and should cause the work to cease. So this is what they were afraid of. This is what the Jews are saying is going to happen or could happen. So it became a problem with this worrying by the Jews. They were rebuilding there. But it says, and it came to pass as the Jews, don't have a link there. Should be a link. The Jews, I'll go by, here it is, living next to them said that they said to us, they ascend from out of all the places that you returned from us. So now they ascend, and they said to us, they ascend from out of all the places that you returned from us. Now, exactly if he's talking about the Samaritans being displaced and they're coming from there. And I stood men in the lowermost topu place, topography is a derivative, from behind the wall, in the protected places, and I stood the people according to Demus, demography? No, I'm trying trying to think of the derivative. It's 12:18 in the book. Demography, that's it. With their broadswords. So he stood them there with broadswords, big swords, and their wooden spears and their bows. So they had all the armaments that they could muster up. And I beheld and rose up and spoke to the important ones and to the strategus. A strategy comes from that, and a commandant, and to the rest of the people, saying, you should not fear from their face. You should remember our great and fearful God. Phoveru, the phobia has to do with fear. And deploy for your brothers, your sons, and your daughters, and your wives, and your residences. Get ready to deploy to do battle. And the Jews have used the women to fight in their different wars, along with the men, daughters, sons, younger people, older people all have jobs to do while they're rebuilding this wall. And it came to pass when our enemies heard, as the Samaritans, for it was made known to us, and God effaced their counsel, and we all returned to the wall, every man to his work. So somehow God has effaced the counsel. It caused them to not want to go and cause any problems. It was all talk, but yet they weren't able to do what they thought they could do, as the Palestinians today hate Israel and always being boisterous about how they're going to destroy it, and Iran's the same way, but yet the Jews have defeated them, 3 or 4 wars now. They haven't been able to do anything, and Israel keeps getting stronger and stronger. God effaces their counsel. And it came to pass from that Emiris day that half of the ones being arrayed, that is with work tools, did the work, and half of them resisted with lances and shields and bows and chest plates. And the rulers were behind the whole house of Judah. Well, I don't know what it means. They're behind it. There could be rulers were in a special place. I'm not exactly sure. Or supporting. Opiso is more of actually being behind something. And the ones building on the wall and the ones lifting things on their shoulders did his work armed in one hand, and with one hand held the arrow, sword or whatever he had, and he had this big stones or whatever is on his shoulder. Well, I'm not a very strong person. I've always been a fairly weak person, 135 pounds, 6 foot tall until I was mid-20s, late 20s, and I just don't have a lot of strength. I can get the work done that I need generally, but sometimes it's a hard time. I bought this hard oak flooring, and and it was like 3/4 of an inch thick, hard oak. So I got this flooring gun. It wasn't pneumatic, which is what I should have gotten, but it was one that you put all these nails in it. They're weird looking kind of nails, but the nail goes up. It's like a stapler, except the nails are 2 or 3 inches long, and it has a big, like a plunger rubber thing on the end, or metal rather, and you take this heavy mallet and you go smash it in, and it drives that nail in. There's a tongue and groove, and it goes in and hides itself, so the next piece of wood will go on there, and that nail will not cause it to stop. Well, okay, so I got it, and I lay it down, and whammo, as hard as I could. Now I couldn't bury the nail. I got it like halfway or so. And so I had a friend that was there and encouraging me to, hit it harder. Oh man, that was hard work for me. I'm just not, my arms are just not that strong. But now at the same time, we were also doing work outside, building this wall, and we had these big, huge stones that were, I think 70 pounds, 80, 60, 70 pounds. And they're big blocks, and you put them on top of each other. So I hired this young guy from down the street that was working at a bakery, and he wanted to work, so he comes there. So he picks this thing up, and he would pick up two of them, one in each hand. I mean, I could barely pick up one. Of course, I'm a lot older too, but even if I was younger, it probably wouldn't make any difference. So anyway, he picks them up, and then he gets this phone call, and as he's going up the stairs, he pulls his phone out, and he talks to this person, and he's holding both of these 70-pound stones. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And then we were tamping with a tamper the sand when we were laying the pavers down. And I had this huge tamper, and it's like a 14-inch square cast iron with a big, long wooden pole. So I had him to tamp, and he goes and busts it right in half. So these are probably the strong people doing this, and the rough people, somebody you wouldn't want to fool around with. They were able to do the work with one hand and then fight with the other. And the builders, a man had his broadsword tied upon his loin, so they had their tools and they had the broadsword, and they built. And the one trumpeting by the keratini was next to me by the horn. Now, it's interesting because a keros is a horn from a goat's horn, or a whatever animal has horns, ram's horn. I think it was ram's horn. And they would cut the horn off, of course, when the animal's dead, and then make it, and it would be all kinds of different types of forms to them, and they blow them. Some of them are bigger than the others, and so forth. But yet it says salpizone, and salpizo, is a trumpet. So it's using the word for blowing a metal trumpet, which is way different, and then the horn, the keratini, which is a ram's horn. But I thought I'd bring that out because in other places where he's trumpeting with the salpizo, it's not the ram's horn, but it's a metal trumpet. And it's very important when you get like in the Feast of the Trumpets. I believe today they call it with a ram's horn, but I don't believe in the Bible, in the Torah, it's a ram's horn. I believe it's a metal horn that they used, and they use this metal horn in different ways and during battle and so forth. But anyway, this man with the horns next to him, and I said to the important ones and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, oh, the work is spacious and vast, a big, huge city, and we are dispersed upon the wall, with each man far from his brother. So you probably had 2 or 3 people working in one spot, and then, a block further on down, working on another thing, or inside and going back and forth, and just scattered all over. So he says, in the place wherever you should hear the sound of the horn, gather together there to us, and our God shall wage war for us. So basically, if there was an attack, then they would tell Nehemiah right away. Nehemiah would run there to that area, and the man with them would be running with them, and they would, all of a sudden, he'd start blowing the horn, and the people would hear, wow, there's the horns blowing way over there. And off all these people would go put their tools down and take off with their armaments to wage war. But God shall wage war for us. He puts God first in the war, not their weapons. And I see Israel today, and I hear the president, and it's all their weapons. I don't hear anything about God, although he may mention God to the Jews, but he doesn't do it when he goes into the United Nations, saying, well, God is with us and so forth, because other nations, the Muslims, think that God is for them, and maybe he feels that, this is going to cause a religious war and we don't need it right now. Whatever the reason is, I haven't heard it recently. And we were doing the work, ergonomics, and the half of us were holding the lances from the ascending of the dawn, early morning, unto the coming out of the stars, exodou. We have exodus in the Greek is this word here, the coming out of the stars in evening. And in that time I said to the people, well, each one with his young one shall lodge in the midst of Jerusalem, not on the edge. And let an advance guard be to us in the night, and let the day be for work. So all the children, the wives, they all go in the middle, and the people slept around the areas, but they had the advance guard there watching, people walking around and watching and so forth, and they worked during the day. And I was there, and my brothers, and the young men, and the men of the advance guard were behind me. And there was not from out of us a man being stripped of his own garments, with a man and his weapons into the water. And I believe what he's talking about is washing your garments. Whenever they were washing their clothes and had their clothes off, naked and clean, he still had his weapons next to him, ready to go to battle. So that is what they're doing, but problems arise, of course, and we will find out the problem in the 5th chapter. Hope you'll join us in the next video seminar, and God bless.